She's not saying anything special. There are other black women in America like her. She's not any more supernaturally free in her thoughts than any other black person who gets into a booth and votes Republican because they are in fact a Republican. Thank you. We are back for another little Gab with Abigail. If you're not back and this is your first time, hi, welcome to Gabs with Abigail, where we talk about the Bates and the Duggars and other D-list fundies. If you aren't subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button because you will be back. The Kool-Aid is in fact delicious on this channel and a little bit addictive. So hit that subscribe button, go ahead and like this video now because I promise you're gonna love it. Today we are keeping up with the D-list fundies, Mrs. Midwest in particular, for a little Black History Month special. So, first and foremost, I want to say congratulations to Caitlin, aka Mrs. Midwest, for her healthy and safe delivery, healthy baby, and we are of course praying and keeping her in our best wishes in terms of her postpartum. I wouldn't wish a terrible postpartum experience on any woman, for the most part, so we're praying for you. But that being said, we are today not going to necessarily bash her. We're not going to go ahead and say, I'm not going to go ahead and call her a racist, but I am going to acknowledge and discuss her race bias. And I'm probably going to take this from a perspective that you aren't expecting. So let's go ahead and get into it. During 2020, Caitlin, Mrs. Midwest, really didn't put out a lot of videos. I think the combination of quarantine and being pregnant, she just didn't do that many. So she really did pump out the videos in 2019, hit her 100K almost at 200, and probably would have been at 200K had she posted more during the 2020 year. Now, also though, what else did she have to do during 2019? But the conversation about homemakers being bored is maybe a story for another day. But I want to say, for so many of y'all to blog, saying that you're wanting to be supportive of each other is interesting to me. And I feel like an excuse for why you're so bored and looking for more fulfillment by calling yourself martyrs. But story for another day. One of the few vlogs that she did do during the 2020 year was vlog number 21, It's Almost Christmas. In this vlog, she basically opens things like letters, gifts from her P.O. box that she had newly established so that fans could send things to her. Because people kept asking, and I don't think that that's anything wrong. It really is very common among influencers. She has a big following and really doesn't do that many sponsorships, so I don't think it's anything abnormal. Back on track, one of the things that she did receive was a copy of Candace Owens' new book. I don't know the title. I don't care to know the title. If you feel compelled, you can Google it. I'm sure you can probably see it in this photo. If you can't, whatever. I'm not promoting you going out and buying it. But anywho, so when I saw that, I couldn't help but basically retch.
Bitch,
because it was a glaring example to me of how white people in general really don't have any black friends and do in fact need them. So I'm gonna take the next couple of minutes to be a black friend to Mrs. Midwest, to you, Mrs. Midwest. And here is my open letter in that regard. Dear Mrs. Midwest, you have a bigger and potentially better impact on black women than Candace Owens will ever have. See, Candace Owens is considered a coon by black people, an Uncle Tom, if you will, the very definition that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. There is no black woman who is going to become a conservative Republican because of Candace Owens. And the reason is because if you Google pander, a picture of Candace Owens tap dancing actually comes up. See, she's a modern day minstrel show. And the reason why white people have a hard time discerning that is because, one, is the minstrel show not always been a good fun time for y'all? And two, white people have a very hard time discerning this because she is the echo of their beliefs. She is the, oh, well, if Candace, a black person, is saying this, how can I be racist? And what people, I guess, fail to realize is that, is a parrot not entertaining, intriguing? Polly wants a cracker, right? See, what you and other white conservatives fail to realize, or just don't want to acknowledge, or just have a hard time looking at your history and track records, but what y'all fail to realize is that a Candace Owens pops up among white conservatives every 20 years or so. I guarantee you, I would be willing to bet good money that there will be another Candace Owens in the 2040s. Hell, it would have been me had Donald Trump won again, because I was gonna get in that bag. Like, why fight it at this point? They're not raising the minimum wage, but that's a conversation for another day. My point is that you're unnecessarily insulting and isolating a part of your audience for no reason over Candace Owens. See, I went through several of your videos and they are littered with black women who express their desire for your lifestyle. You know who comments under Candace Owens' content? White men. One thing I want to point out that's extremely important that you understand about the black women who admire you is that they don't have the same privileges as you. That you think that we presently live in a society that wants and encourages women to be masculine must be an extremely white society, because that just is not the case with black women. And if you are trying to push this movement of femininity and gender roles, you need to be able to address that black women are not met with the same level of grace in terms of just putting on a dress, softening the tone of their voice, and all of a sudden being considered more feminine. It's this weird false narrative that you are always presenting, that we are in this world that is rewarding women for masculinity. You yourself co-signed that Lana Del Rey's lascivious hedonism is considered feminine, whereas Cardi B's lascivious hedonism is considered masculine for the reason only that I can think that she is rapping, and that's problematic. I mean, are you saying then that you would listen to SZA at the same level that Lana Del Rey is acceptable? Or is there something that makes them different, despite the fact that Lana Del Rey herself admits that they are singing about the same exact kind of music? So what, pray tell, is the difference? Cardi B is married. Cardi B has a child. She's technically in that realm, in that sense, living a more traditional lifestyle than Lana Del Rey is, yet one is being considered feminine and the other is masculine, aggressive, and should be avoided by the feminine woman. I get the point. I get the gist in terms of what the music sounds like, but the content does in fact matter. We are not at a point in American history where the stereotype of the strong, angry, hypersexual, aggressive black woman does not exist. The stereotype of the sapphire woman is so deeply embedded into American society that even black men echo it. So what is the sapphire? From the Ferris University Museum of Jim Crow Memorabilia, this is defined as, quote, "The sapphire caricature portrays black women as rude, loud, malicious, stubborn, and overbearing. This is the angry black woman popularized in television and cinema. She is tart-tongued and emasculating, one hand on hip and the other pointing and jabbing or arms akimbo, violently and rhythmically rocking her head, mocking African American men for offenses ranging from being unemployed to sexually pursuing white women. She is a shrill nagger with irrational states of anger and indignation and is often mean-spirited and abusive. Although African American men are her primary targets, she has venom for anyone who insults or disrespects her. The sapphire's desire to dominate and her hypersensitivity to injustices make her a perpetual complainer, but she does not criticize to improve things. Rather, she criticizes because she is unendingly bitter and wishes that unhappiness on others. Without fail, Black men who date white women, when asked why, will say that white women are softer, they're more submissive than Black women. Imagine being met with that narrative and stereotype at the door from men of all races, without any choice in it, because women like you espouse beliefs about white traditional feminine qualities. You have no idea what it's like to not be able to speak up in school or in your workplace about certain things that occur that happen to you because you're Black, without it being, oh, this angry Black woman stereotype. You have no idea what it's like to not be able to tell people, I don't want you touching my hair without permission, or what it's like to when people feel like Trayvon Martin's death is justified and you can't say anything retaliatory back. You have no idea what it's like to not be able to stand up for yourself in those ways without being considered masculine and aggressive, right? On onset, even if it is deserving. Imagine there are so many of your videos where you say, well, it's okay to stick up for yourself if someone is doing, X, Y, and Z, talking bad about you in terms of like wanting to be a homemaker, and you've given them a chance to, and given them grace or for them to be nice. So do you understand that Black women don't have that same courtesy, with that it's still coming off as extremely aggressive and masculine and angry? And that will dominate the narrative about your conversation and the kind of person that you are moving forward. In many ways, the idea of feminism that you and other conservatives rail against is white feminism. And if we're talking about the birth of the feminist movement during the time period you claim to not want to return us to, then we have to talk about Betty Friedan. And why we have to talk about it is because as a Canadian, Mrs. Midwest, I just don't really trust your knowledge of the feminist movement in American history. So here is a quick little recap, Miss Mamas. In the late 1950s, Mrs. Betty Friedan wrote The Feminine Mystique, in which she felt like housewives were discontent. After everything was done with their work, there was this lingering question of, is that all? Sparking a conversation and a movement that sought to give women the option to work outside the house and homes and have careers if being super key, they wanted to. This movement would eventually appear more radical as it opened the door for women to demand that other sexist oppressions be addressed. Now, currently, this has presently turned into something that means that women hate men, but we won't talk about that today. In terms of Betty Friedan wanting a career, however, for Black women, there was very little if as it pertained to having a job and a career outside of the home. The reality is that Black women have had to work since they came here in 1619 on ships. Black men did not have the same level of economic opportunity as white men to have all of these housewives just in the house languishing, wishing that they could go out and work and apply their degrees to jobs, right? Every white person in America knows Dr. Martin Luther King's I Had a Dream speech and uses it as a morality compass to say that they do not see color. Conveniently, history has papered over the fact that the March on Washington was in fact a march for economic opportunity. And since then, however, economic inequality still continues to run rampant. However, since no one sees color, right, these must be just the failings of Black people at this point. The coddling and the welfare state that the Democrats, according to Candace Owens, have created, correct? No, it's not correct. But white people like you are allowed to think that they're going to see the gates of heaven because a Black person like Candace Owens co-signed this sentiment. Fast forward to today, because as you stated in your 10 lies that society likes to tell women video, you said that having a career in our society that's closer to 2050 versus 1950, having a career isn't groundbreaking. As if the first female vice president wasn't just elected this year. As if there are not still Black women who are being firsts in certain positions of leadership, as if there are not seats at certain tables that we are still having to demand a spot at. There are makeup companies who to this day still cannot offer a diverse range of shades and tones for Black women in their makeup brands. Due to the lack, and this is due to the lack of Black women and people who work for these companies, who head these companies, who are there for them to ask. So you have to understand how your race bias can really be showing sometimes. In that same video, you were correct that it's not at all unique for Black women to have a job. You're incorrect for trying to use unique and groundbreaking interchangeably. Talking about the economic disparity between Black people and white people in this country, you have to understand for us as Black women, being able to not work because your husband makes enough money is like a symbol of affluence. If you don't have to work because your husband is making enough money for you to live that lifestyle. Do you know that one of the most viral videos that went around during the 2020 quarantine was a TikTok in which a man goes up to people driving nice cars in like Dallas and other major cities and asks them,
You know what? I'm not.
Excuse me, what do you do for a living?
What do you mean?
Like, what do you do for a living?
I'm married. Why?
Married? Oh.
I'm married, why? Do you know how many Black women retweeted that video when it was captioned life goals? So I cannot emphasize enough that there are more Black women who want your lifestyle than they want to have to tap dance for money like Candace Owens. But I understand that you can't read rooms that you aren't in. I get from your perspective that women should want to be stay-at-home moms and wives and homemakers without necessarily living in luxury and opulence and excessive wealth, as exhibited by your several videos about budgeting and being thrifty. However, Black women have been having to budget and be thrifty since 1619, Miss Mamas. We want upper middle class luxuries at a minimum. At a minimum. At a schminimum. Reading Candace Owens' book is only going to reinforce the lie that the Republican Party is better than the Democrat Party. If she was being honest with herself, she would be rejecting both parties and admitting that both have failed Black Americans at different and bipartisan times, and that the only step forward, rejecting loyalty to either for some reason gets you labeled as a radical, when really it's just the case that you're having the hindsight that you need to be extremely critical of both if you're going to be serving your best self-interest as a Black person. For you, Mrs. Midwest, Caitlin, I would recommend, rather than reading some woman off the street's book, that you read books that are actually researched and empirically proved, such as Reproducing Racism, The White Racial Frame, The New Jim Crow, and Slavery by Another Name, just as a couple books where you could start from. Hell, you could read For Color Girls at this point if it would give you a more varied perspective on Black women and Blackness without having to look at political parties, just to understand the narrative and the struggle, or what it means to be feminine, aggressive, and perceived and walking in this world as a Black woman. And if your whiteness, your traditional conservative values make you uncomfortable with the content of those books, you need to be self-reflective enough to ask yourself, why are you comfortable with the content that's in Candace Owens' book? Growing is never comfortable. Growing a baby was uncomfortable. Having to tell people that you want to be a homemaker and forgo a career is something you and everybody else is saying is constantly uncomfortable. When you said that you wanted to stop being so introverted for the sake that that you needed to know other moms so that your child could be properly social, that had to have been uncomfortable. You were initially uncomfortable with the idea of having a dog instead of a cat. So to grow your femininity movement, your feminine family, you need to understand that there has to be some level of being uncomfortable. You need to start making uncomfortable choices about understanding race relations in America. It is not enough for Black women to have their own femininity blogs and vlogs to address this stereotype if, when they walk into rooms, it is assumed by white people that they prefer Cardi B compared to Lana Del Rey. This is a conversation and re-education that white people have to do for themselves. And unfortunately, those conversations do not begin in Candace Owens' books or comments. You can be traditional and conservative about a lot of things, but race and racism is the one thing, at the minimum, you have to be progressive about. The reality is that if conservatives, moderates, and liberals were getting it right, none of the riots that have occurred in the last 50 years would have occurred. Not a single one if they were getting it correct. In conclusion, I really want to implore you to acknowledge and recognize how much more powerful you are as a force for change than Candace Owens will ever be, and reconsider the necessity of supporting her so publicly. It's one thing to co-sign her beliefs, but to have to cape for her is just super unnecessary. I promise you that it is. She's not saying anything special. There are other Black women in America like her. She's not any more supernaturally free in her thoughts than any other Black person who gets into a booth and votes Republican because they are in fact a Republican. And it's that for her, it's interesting that, always is the narrative that why is everything about race? And the same can be asked about Candace Owens. How much it is intrinsic to her brand that she talked down about the race issue in America. If that did not exist, she would not see a single freaking penny. And if you can't discern that about her character, I don't know how much else I can say, but that it's quite literally the truth that she would not have a platform or any kind of place to speak if it were not for the fact that she is Black and that there is a race relation issue in America. If there was no seeing color, I promise you Candace Owens would not have slots on Fox in the Manor and other conservative outlets at CPAC or wherever else she's been invited to speak if that were not the case. And she knows that, but it's easier to pretend that I don't even want to say pretend, she knows that. But at this point one makes more money. So again, in conclusion, I would just like to ask you to really, really consider the fact that you are in a more powerful position to change people over to your side than she is, and to educate yourself so that you can tread lightly. It's not to say that you've on many occasions offended, but your glaring ignorance for this is just something that I cannot ignore and willingly consume and enjoy your content. So sis, XOXO, mwah, 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 your temp Black BFF. Don't use the N-word. P.S. You are not invited to the cookout.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.